And welcome back to Love Your Food. This week we are making a really delicious sort of appetizer sort of thing. This is vol au vent. Now, they can be sweet. Typically they're savory. The word comes from windblown and it basically refers to this beautiful light and fluffy puff pastry. Now, we made ours pretty thin. They still did puff up, but we'll show you exactly what we're talking about, and here's our ingredients. So we're starting with that beautiful chivre, the herbed bechamel, and some goat cheese that we're going to add in there. Some of that onion jam we made last week, a little bit of milk, and some puff pastry. Now, we also did a recipe not too long ago for Blitz Puff, and really super easy, honestly, and if you want to use store-bought, you can, absolutely. So we're going to start with our goat cheese. We're going to use about half of that log of goat cheese, and the rest we're going to just set aside. We'll use that for something else later. And we're going to add that to our bechamel, that beautiful herbed bechamel sauce that we made. First thing we're going to do is we're going to soften a little bit. It's quite hard. We got it out of the fridge, so it's cold and pretty stiff right now. Now we want to blend this with that beautiful creamy bechamel sauce, so it's got to be a little bit softer. So we're just going to soften a little bit and set that aside while we start getting our puff pastry ready. Now we're going to get that off of the paper. A little bit of flour on top, and we just want to extend this a little bit. We're going to roll this out until it's a little bit longer than it is wide. We're going to try and get 6 out of this instead of the 4 that we'd get if we just used it plain. Now, rolling it out does a couple of things. Number one, your vol au vents aren't going to be quite as lofty. They're not going to be quite as tall, but they still will puff up, and they'll get that beautiful crispy texture that are so delicious about puff pastry. So just going to give it a quick mark to make sure that you're getting pretty even lines here. We're going to cut this into 6 squares. And there we go. So once you've got that divided up, we're going to just make sure that they're all pretty square. If they're not, you could just give them a little roll out and let it relax just a little bit once you've rolled it. While that's happening, we're going to mix in our bechamel sauce to the goat cheese. We can stir that together and give it a good blend, and all that dairy sort of comes together pretty easily. So we're just going to keep mixing it until it's pretty uniform, well combined. The goat cheese is going to give a little bit of structure, a little bit of sourness to that incredibly rich bechamel sauce, and just a little bit more flavor and everything. And now we're going to do sort of a different way of doing the vol au vent. Now, typically, these are done with a ring mold or a ring cutter, where you cut a smaller ring out of the middle of one and stack it on top of the other. This is just an easy way to not have to do all of that, and you can use your square pieces like this. So we're just going to cut these slits along 2 corners and leave the other 2 corners connected. And what we're going to be doing is folding those over to the opposite corners. Now you want to make sure your surface is well floured for this, because they will stick a little bit. So we're just going to give a little bit of a milk wash to the inside just to help them stick to themselves. So just a little bit of a brush on there, and then you want to gently fold those over and make sure the corner hits and that the edges are all lined up. And that's going to be exactly what we're looking for right there. And then you're going to fold the other side over the top. And then in the corners, you get these really fancy looking little sort of fold over areas that are honestly very nice presentation. It just happens to be how it works out. And this way you don't have to mess around with using a round mold or anything like that. And we're going to pop a little bit of that beautiful bechamel sauce into the middle of these. Now that's going to spread out, and a little bit, the goat cheese is going to help it solidify a little bit as it cooks. And certainly as it cools. Now that's going to spread out and fill that whole area, so don't worry about that. And the sides are going to puff up to sort of contain it. Now on some of these, we're going to add a little bit of that really delicious, flavorful onion jam, just for a little bit of interest on top there. And honestly, those worked out extremely well. We should have done it on all of them, but it was sort of an experiment to see if it would work, and it did. So if you try this, we do recommend it. We're just going to give these a little bit of a milk wash. And that adds a sort of a nice smooth texture on the top as it bakes, and certainly doesn't harm the puffing at all. So once those are all ready, we're just going to put those into our preheated oven. And then when they are done, they will have sort of a nice brown, crispy look on the outside, and they will have puffed up a little bit, and that filling will have filled in the whole space. Some of them went a little bit over. We could have used a little less, but more filling won't hurt anyone. And then you can see here, we're just going to cut that open, and that beautiful pastry cooked all the way through, a little bit flaky. Again, as I said, we cut it pretty thin, or we rolled it pretty thin, so it's not going to be as high and lofty as sometimes, but you can see that bottom is perfectly cooked, nice and crispy, and that's it. Really, really simple. These go as an appetizer or party food. They're really delicious. People will definitely come back for more, and super, super easy to make. Very, very quick and delicious, especially if you have, extra puff pastry in your freezer. If you like this recipe, please do like and subscribe, and if you have any recipes you'd like to see Chef Caleb try on the channel, please let us know in the comments below. You can also join our supporters on Patreon. I'll put a link to that in the description below as well. And remember to love your food.